How's it going, everyone? Today we have a story time of one of the most spoiled rich kids I've ever heard of in my entire life. This kid says that he literally has a superpower where he can smell if someone is poor or if they're rich. I'm not even kidding you guys. This kid actually thinks he can smell the poor in someone, which is absolutely insane. Leave a like in the video right now to claim your free nothing. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and like stories. And with that being said, let's just jump right into this spoiled kid story time. So this story was submitted by a subscriber who we're going to call Andrew. Anyways, Andrew went to high school with this kid who we're going to call Brat, Chad. Let's call him Chad, right? So Chad was someone who came from a super wealthy family, like absolutely super wealthy, and his dad owned basically half the town's businesses. So if you went to the local mall, half the kind of nondescript shops and restaurants were owned by Chad, like basically Chad's family. They had been in this city for a bit, or this town, for like the last 100 years, and Chad's like great-great-grandfather started like some steel mill or something in the town that like brought it prosperity, and then they eventually started like acquiring different locations and places all around town. So everyone kind of knew Chad as kind of like the kid who was like from the super wealthy family who basically owned the entire town. And if that was the case alone, like that's nothing necessarily against him. Like, if he was a pretty chill guy and, like, that was just a truth, like, there's nothing there that he can really control, if that makes sense. Like, he can't control if his parents are rich. He can't control if his parents have done well. But the one thing that he can absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, control is, is he a massive pee-pee? You know what I'm saying? Like, that is the only thing he can control. And here's the thing, too. His parents, one of the reasons why everyone knew so many details about how rich his parents were, and his whole family, was that Chad never missed an opportunity to flaunt it. He never missed an opportunity to let someone know that he wasn't super rich. And I should say, massive caveat there, he wasn't anything, bro. His family was rich. I think this is something that spoiled rich kids, especially in these stories, sometimes always forget, is that, bro, yeah, you're quote unquote rich. I don't know if that's true. It's your family's rich. You haven't done anything to kind of award you haven't done anything to justify like all the wealth you have. And like, if that's a situation that you just kind of spawn into, like if you're watching this and your parents are pretty rich, bro, that's nothing against you, like 100%. But it's just something really where it's like, okay, then what are you going to do for yourself? And then in addition to that, it's like, okay, cool. Now, what are you going to do with it? And are you going to pretend like it's yours? That's the big thing. And Chad would always let everyone know this. So yeah, Andrew and his friends really did not like this kid. And this kid had a long history of just being extremely spoiled. And I'll give you a couple examples right now. So here's an example, right? So one time when there was a group project, this happened a year before the whole smelling poor people story. This happened a year before that. But basically, right, they had a group project together. So it was Chad and then it was also Andrew. And they were in the same class and they were put in the same group or whatever. And they were all kind of sitting there talking about whatever. The actual details aren't that important. But he pulls out of his bag a brand new, like crazy expensive laptop. So, with like the Apple laptops, how you can just upgrade them like an insane amount. Like an Apple laptop is already fairly expensive. I mean, I'm definitely a fan of like a Mac. I'm just not a huge gamer myself. So, I mean, I do play some games. I'm more of a chess guy than a gaming guy. I do love Minecraft, though. It will always be a staple of my childhood. But, I've never been the biggest gamer, so I've always been more of a Mac person. I make my YouTube videos on my phone anyways, so the compatibility of being able to just airdrop them is really nice. But one thing that's true with MacBooks is like, you can buy a crazy amount of storage. Like you can upgrade your processor to a point where I'm pretty sure if you go to the Apple checkout page right now, you can probably customize a laptop to be over $10,000. Well, that's exactly what Chad said. So everyone kind of knew that it was like a pretty beefy laptop, but like you can't laser vision look at a laptop and be like, oh, that has 2 terabytes or 4 terabytes of storage. Like, bro, you can't do that. It's like, oh my God, I can smell the gigabytes of RAM on your computer. Like that's just not a thing you can do. So since Chad, by the way, had no use for 99% of the upgrades he bought. He had like 4 terabytes, whatever, a huge number of gigabytes of RAM. I'm just not a computer guy like that. He's not doing anything. He's not doing massive graphic design projects, video projects. He's not doing anything in Premiere Pro. He's not trying to build a video game, run VS Code, try to like do a big coding project, launch an app. He's not doing anything that could even near justify needing that much storage and needing that much RAM. He literally just bought it for the sake of the flex, which I think is one of the craziest things I've ever heard. Buying storage on your computer just to show that you're better than everyone else because they have less storage. But he literally said, bro, I have more terabytes of storage than you, so I'm a better person. Like, literally insane. Yeah, so he let everyone know that the exact specs, and then at the very end of letting everyone know this, by the way, they were in a group project. They had work that they had to do, but he was too busy doing all this nonsense and of telling everyone that he was literally dragging them behind. Anyways, though, sure enough, right at the very end of it, he said, how much do you think this cost? And he's like, everyone there was kind of like, I don't really know. What, like a couple thousand? He's like, my family spent over $10,000 on this computer because I need the nicest things ever, and no one will ever stand in the way of this. So yeah, this is pretty crazy by itself, but it doesn't end here. Another example was one time during lunch, Chad would throw away perfectly good food from his catered meals if it wasn't quote unquote Instagram worthy. So yeah, it's not as if the subscriber here is like friends with Chad. If anything, it's very much not the case. But it's a relatively smaller school, so sometimes people would there's a few lunch tables, and sometimes the subscriber Andrew will just happen to be at the same table that Chad is at, and like he's not being like, oh my God, it's my buddy Chad. I gotta sit next to him at lunch, man. I gotta go in there and sit next to my close personal best friend, Chad. Like, I'm so excited for that. No, it's just like he happened to be in the same situation. But just another example of just how spoiled he is, bro. It's just like he would literally like because you could either have the school lunch, which was like, it was pretty mid, but like also it was, pretty inexpensive. And, sometimes parents is like, you don't have the time to put it together. It's just too, whatever, right? A lot of people have the school lunch. You also have the option of having, like, if your parents want to bring in lunch or whatever for you or make lunch for you, you can bring in lunch. In Chad's situation, it was like his family's private personal chef. So you already know that food was awesome. And people would have to watch him throw away perfectly good food. Like, and I don't even just mean like, oh, that was edible. Like, this isn't they're starving kids around the world argument of like, you shouldn't throw out food because like, even if it's not your favorite, you should still eat it. I'm making an argument of like, this was like 5-star restaurant, 3 Michelin star chef type food. Like, this was some of the most incredible, best smelling food whenever Andrew would be near him that he's seen. Like, if he got anything that this kid Chad comes in for lunch at school at a restaurant, bro, Andrew would be so excited and get it again and be like, man, this is a wonderful restaurant. And I think Chad kind of knew this. So I think he had always asked like the personal chef to put in additional things so that he could go out of his way to throw out his food and still have more food to eat. And he basically said, like, if anything wasn't Instagram worthy, it was going into the trash, right? So while everyone else was eating like your very basic cafeteria slop sandwiches that were just like, hey man, I got to eat the gruel, I got to have the nutrients, I just got to like eat it, man, whatever. He was throwing away at like, yeah, bro, he's like throwing away at, just really incredible food. And in between doing that, he would just like laugh about how, any of the kids at, who were maybe getting like trying to work a part-time job or trying to like, I don't know, resell Pokemon cards or try to like have little side hustles or something to make a little bit of money. He would laugh that his daily allowance was more than most people would make in a month trying to hustle, which, by the way, like daily allowance, I never got an allowance when I was a kid personally. I mean, I think when I was a kid, if I really, really wanted something, like It'd have to be a conversation with my mom, and depending on like how stable things were, I had a good childhood. I'm not in any way insinuating anything else, but it's not like I could point at something and say, yes, I want that and get it. Like very much like grew up of a kind of, you can be rewarded, but you just can't have anything whenever you want it. But this kid was basically like spoiled Brad Cartman, bro, from South Park. It's actually insane. But he would get like over $100 every single day. I don't even know as a kid how I'd spend $100 every single day. Like, what do you even do? Do you just spend it on Fortnite skins, like V-Bucks? Like, you're just buying a bunch of Robux? Like, what are you doing with that money every single day? Anyways, though, it keeps going. I just want to give you even more mini stories to give you the proper context so you have a true deep understanding of just how much of a spoiled brat this kid truly was. So this happened 6 months before this story happened. This story happened in kind of like mid-November, and this was happening towards the end of their year last year. So towards the end of the year is kind of like the class trip. They went to this really cool historical museum, and they did it for the second half of the day. It was really fun. People have been waiting on this for a while. I don't want to give away too many details of this museum, just because whenever I tell these stories from you guys, and by the way, these are all subscriber submitted stories. All you need to do to submit your own story, go to Instagram, look up Connor Pugs. I have over 1 million followers in there. I actually do like 150 million views every single month on my short videos. So I do other social media accounts too, but I'm coming back to this because Prime Connor Pugs is back, just so you know. And just message me the story. But whenever I get these stories, I always mix up a lot of the details, and then I leave some stuff vague on purpose because I never want a story that you guys submit to ever come back to you. So I always mix up the details and names enough that it's like almost a unique story every time, really just for the sake of privacy. So I don't want to give away too much about what this museum was, just in case you're able to vaguely figure out the location. But it was a pretty cool museum. Anyways, though, so there's a school trip to the museum, but Chad unironically bribed the bus driver with cash to make a stop at a fancy coffee shop just for him, delaying literally everyone and then bragging that money talks when the teachers got upset about it. And they got mad, but here's the thing. The teachers couldn't really do anything because who funded this trip? And also, who funds the entire school? Yes, you heard me right. So basically, this kid, Chad, was like, oh my God, we're going by my favorite $35 latte place. Like, can we make a stop? And obviously the bus driver's like, no, I have very distinct rules of like, I need to get you to this place. And then Chad literally whips out $300, 3 singular $100 bills in hard cash. And he's like, will this change your mind? So yeah, absolutely insane behavior. Everyone was super upset, especially when word got out. And at the museum, one of the teachers confronted Chad, and he literally said like, okay, bring it to the principal, bring it to the administration. You can see if you have any case against me. You can see if you can do anything. And he just had this smirk on his face. And so allegedly, this is the rumor that went around, and there might be some false bits to this, I'm not totally sure. But the rumor that went around is that the teacher went to the school administration, and they basically were like, you're totally right, that's insane, and you should tell him not to do that again. But we really have our hands tied, like this is a bad situation. Unfortunately, because like his dad basically funds the entire school, we've actually gotten pretty explicit, like, hey, like, I'm not asking for my son to have special treatment, but my son is going to get special treatment. Like he is going to have very special treatment here. And if not, like maybe I'll have him go to a different school in the area and I'll fund that school. So yeah, this kid basically, unfortunately, like ran the school, and it was really, really unfortunate. But with all of that context, I think you have a pretty good feeling of how much of a spoiled rich kid, entitled brat that Chad is. And now we can get to the day. Fast forward to today, or not actually today, but today in the story's arc. They were sitting in class, and it was a really, really boring lecture. And Andrew was at the point of nearly falling asleep. Like he was playing some like fun games on his phone or whatever, but it was getting to a point where he's just like, bro, this is so boring. Not even like playing Clash Royale on my phone is going to get me out of being bored, just because I'm not even paying attention to the lecture, but it's just genuinely so boring that it's like sucking the energy out of me without me even knowing what's going on. Like that's how boring and bad it was. Anyways, so they have kind of random seating. You can sit wherever you want, but you know, a lot of times people would have unassigned assigned seats in classes. But in this class, people honestly just sat in random places. Like I know for most of my classes in high school, middle school, and college, like you would kind of find a place that you'd sit. And I rarely actually had assigned seating, but you would kind of sit in more or less the same spot every single time. The first week of class is really the only time where you could almost like pick your spot unofficially, because at some point like everyone would just sit in the same place. And if you sat in their spot, it would like obviously it's not like assigned seating, but I don't know if this happens with you guys. It's like, dude, you just sat in my unassigned assigned seat. What's going on? But in this class, it was actually pretty random. People would always sit all over. Andrew's not exactly sure why this was the case, but it just was the case. So sure enough, right, Chad happened to sit next to Andrew, both in the back of the class, both of them not really trying to pay attention. Extremely boring class. You already know how it is. And at this point, I think Chad is also super bored, but he has this little mischievous look on his face. And Chad leans over to the subscriber, Andrew, with super smug grin, and he whispers, and I'm not going to whisper, I want you guys to hear it, but he says, in a whispering voice, he says, you know, I can literally smell if someone is poor. It's like a vibe or something, mixed with like cheap shampoo and discount clothes. Yeah, so at this point, Andrew was pretty stunned. I mean, look, he knew this kid was an absolute wreck. Like, he knew this kid was the most spoiled rich kid entitled Brat of all time. But even this felt like a little bit like jarring. Like, he knew that that Chad would flex on everyone about how rich he was. But Chad wasn't really the type to go after poor people. So I know that sounds a little bit weird. And you're like, yo, but Connor, like, he was basically going after poor people, basically discriminating. Like, he was basically doing that by saying, look how amazing my life is because of how rich I am. I would say that's more in the category of him bragging about how much money he has. And I guess he was, like, inadvertently, like, looking down on people. Because, yeah, for sure, if you're throwing out your school money or your lunch because it's not Instagram worthy, that is a direct slap in the face for some people who would have done anything to have such a great lunch. Or being able to bribe the bus driver, yeah, that's a slap in the face of people because they probably lost 45 minutes or even an hour because he took a sweet time. So instead of being able to go to the museum for 4 hours, they only had 3 hours, right? And probably even a little bit less. So yes, but this is the first time he's literally said like anything directly against poor people. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's a difference of like how direct he is. So yeah, I mean, yeah, Andrew was completely stunned. Especially since, like, bro, like, Andrew's family wasn't that rich. They weren't, like, I don't know, destitute and poverty, but they weren't, like, that rich. And he just, like, looks at him like, bro, what the heck? Like, what are you even saying? And that's where things got even crazier. So Chad is like, no, dude, like, you don't understand. Like, I'm low-key, like, a superhero because I have this superpower, which I'm just like, bro, you're literally a villain. What are you talking about? But I don't know, Andrew's like, okay, bro, like, whatever. And Chad kind of leans over to someone else, says the same thing. They kind of gave him this kind of look of like, bro, what? And that's where Chad is like, dude, I can prove my superpower. And he kind of organizes this insane thing. So at this point, Andrew, and we're going to loop in this other kid, Ben. Ben and Andrew were kind of friends. But they were both extremely bored, and they were almost like, it was almost entertaining how insane this kid was. That's one thing I want you guys to understand is like at a certain point when someone is just this spoiled and this entitled, it's almost funny. It's almost like funny and entertaining to see just like how delusional they are, how just like out of their mind these people can be, of just like thinking that they're genuinely better than other people for no reason at all. Like, I will say that like at this point, Andrew maybe shouldn't have done this, but Chad was like, yo, I'm going to prove my powers to you, and, like, I want to show you guys. So Andrew shouldn't have, like, agreed to go along with it, but sure enough, Ben, Andrew, and Chad, they all had kind of a free period, and the class after, like, kind of didn't really, it was, like, a big lecture type, like, it didn't really hold close attendance. So they're like, okay, screw it, we can kind of sneak out. And Chad has decided that he's going to, quote unquote, prove his quote unquote superpower by organizing this wild poverty hunt, as he put it, which is an absolute insane thing to say. And he basically dragged Andrew and Ben to their local mall. So the mall that was like literally a 10-minute walk away from the school. At this point, like they just kind of skipped the last class of the day. They usually walk back anyways. And at this point, they're just like, okay, we'll go along with them. So anyways, on the walk onto the mall, he's like, dude, like, I don't think you understand. Like, I think the FBI is going to contact me because I have this crazy superpower. Like, I'm pretty sure at this point, Chad was like trolling a little bit, but I think he's also just so delusional. Who knows? And he's also reminding everyone that, like, yeah, like my parents own at least half the stores and restaurants in the mall. I basically own the mall. They'll let me do anything, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So anyways, he drags a few of them to the mall to quote unquote sniff out poor people and basically mock them. And he would like walk down because it was like it was not a strip mall, like all the stores were inside. So we'd walk by and be like, oh, yes, that is a 10 out of 10 poor right there. Yeah, so this was kind of nuts. Like, it was literally Chad just going around, basically just being an absolute, like, just not a great dude to people. I mean, here's the good thing, like, he wasn't being super blatant or apparent to the people he was doing this quote-unquote, like, poor person examination on, which, thank God he wasn't doing that, because that's just kind of next level, just, like, absolutely not a good dude right there. But at the same time, bro, like, it's still next level he was doing this. And Chad at this point was so proud of his like poor person detection skills, even though who knows, here's the thing, he didn't prove anything. He would just be like sniff, he would walk by someone, sniff and be like, yep, they're definitely poor. And there's actually wasn't a single person that he didn't sniff and then subsequently go on to say that they were poor, partially maybe because like in his mind, he's the only rich person and everyone else has to be poor. But he didn't really prove anything. Like, not that even if, look, let's say he had that skill. It's not like it's a great skill to have. And to actually prove it, he would have to like go figure out the bank account history and financial records of every person. So it's not like he was able to prove it anyways. At this point, Andrew and his friends, or Andrew and Ben, I should say, it's just the two of them, were just so amused by the fact that like Chad thought that this was a good idea and he was so excited to quote unquote do this. Like, at this point, they're just almost laughing along the way of, like, this is insane, man. And here's the thing. Here's where the twist comes. A little bit of a plot twist. And if you made it this far into the video, I want you to comment shoe down below. I'm just looking at a shoe right now, so that'll be the secret word of the day. If you don't know, I always ask people to comment a word, just so I can see the names and faces of people who made it this far into the video, as the best way to support the channel, whether you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, which make sure you are subscribed with notifications on YouTube, and on Spotify, make sure you have followed the podcast and rated it 5 stars. But the best way you can really help is just by watching these videos and watching them for a long time. Anyways, so sure enough, right, karma starts to hit a little bit because Chad basically... they ended up Chad was so enthusiastic to keep proving himself that he brought them around all around town. And Chad was someone who's like, yeah, like my parents own this town, bro. Like I know it inside and out. So he refused to use like a Google map or anything. And they ended up getting to like a pretty, like the not so good part of town. And when I say the not so good part of town, you kind of know what I'm saying here, right? It's just like definitely like a little bit sketchier, definitely a little bit riskier, and probably not a place you want to go up and start sniffing people randomly. Anyways, though, they start walking by and they see like someone, like a street performer who was doing a magic trick or whatever. And I'll tell you exactly the context of this later, but let me just say that this was the beginning of the end. So at this point, the street performer, whatever, there's kind of a group around him, was like, oh, like, you should come watch this trick. And Chad's like, okay, like, and he looks at Andrew and Ben like, I'm going to smell the poor and all these people watch. So he walks over there, and this guy's like doing this like crazy magic trick. And there's this big crowd around, and they all like are surprised or whatever. And they walk away. And that's when Chad's like, yep, I smelled the poor in all of them. In fact, and then he looks, and he had a like $3,000 watch on his wrist, gone. They turn around, and that big group of people, gone. So not only is the person doing the magic trick gone, but the quote-unquote crowd around him also gone. So basically what happened is that they were kind of sitting there. The person who was doing the magic trick, the people that were watching him were also in on it. They were just looking for a good target, and while Chad was completely distracted by the magic trick, someone else in the crowd like very carefully slipped the watch off of him. So at this point, Chad's like, bro, hey, you know how much like this watch was worth? And he starts like running around, and he's like, we have to find who did it. We have to do it. Yeah. So at this point, they know that these guys are gone. Andrew and Ben look at each other like, bro, like there's no way that Buddy went around trying to smell the pour on people and just ended up getting sneaky robbed. Like, here's the thing. It's not justified to go and rob someone. Like, if you got caught, and this would be really big capital punishment. I'm just saying it's very interesting how the world works, and it's very enlightening to see sometimes karma is very real. And this is where it gets absolutely hilarious. So they're running around. They get to like more of the center of town. There's a big fountain. They're kind of back to like the normal part. And I think Chad is just completely desperately running around trying to find them. And he's so kind of like caught up in running around that he trips and falls into the fountain. And this guy was wearing like full-on designer clothes from head to toe, and he completely ruins like all of his clothes. And basically at this point, Andrew and Ben are like stifling their laughter right now. And they just hear Chad go, no, not my Gucci, not my Louis, no, it's ruined, no. And he just like sits on the ground, and it's just, he's like starts crying, like the most pathetic tears you'll ever hear. Look, I can understand like if you get robbed and then all your clothes get ruined, man, I wouldn't be that happy either. But it's just kind of karma working the way it does. You go around out of your way to basically make fun of poor people, and then you end up have all this stuff happen to you. But here's the thing. Nothing physically bad happened to him. He wasn't hurt. He really wasn't hurt. Nothing bad like that happened. It was the only bad things that happened to him impacted his quote-unquote high status, quote-unquote luxury goods. So it's like almost the way that karma worked here was like he made fun of people for being poor. So karma came back and took things from him that made him quote-unquote rich, which I just thought was very interesting. But this was like the funniest. This was like the most insane thing ever because like fell into the fountain, ruining his designer clothes. And he ended up having to call his butler for a ride home. But here's the thing. Ben was recording the whole thing on his phone sneakily. So the video, and here's the thing, Andrew doesn't really condone, like, Andrew's like, I'm not being a part of this. But basically, they posted this video. It didn't get like millions of views or anything, but it went mini viral. Like, it went viral in their town. So it had like 8,000 views, but like most of them were people in the town. And then everyone knew him as like, they started calling him Sniffly McRich. Just kind of not it's kind of, I don't know. I think people could have been more clever. But basically because he was just like bawling like a massive baby, bro, being like, my designer clothes are ruined. And he starts screaming as butler, you need to get here right now. And it's, he was already like known as a pretty spoiled kid. But this video was just so embarrassing and so hilarious. Like all the other times of him being quote unquote spoiled, like he almost had the upper hand. It was him saying, like, you can't go, like, you're going to stop and not go to, the museum because I want to have my coffee. Or, oh, you're going to watch me throw away my awesome food because I'm just for the sake of doing it because I can. But this time, he's sitting there in a puddle, crying like a little baby, screaming at his, like, butler, whatever. And then all of a sudden, this kid didn't have a good reputation, but he went from, like, someone everyone didn't like to someone that everyone thought was a complete laughingstock. So this is what happens when you push the limits of karma, because karma will hit you back, and karma might hit you back 10 times harder than you punched first.